Hi class, this is your instructor Megan again. In this video, as promised, I'm going to discuss the thesis paper. So let me tell you what this thesis paper is about. You're going to research and write an analytical paper exploring a question from your project. So the thesis paper isn't a completely different project from your creative project, but rather a way to conduct research for your project that's going to make your project better. For example, in the creative project video, I discussed a former student's project in which he tackled the idea that college students have trouble understanding where to get research online and have trouble writing research papers. So he created a social network for college students who were writing research papers to share their work with each other and get feedback and research tips. The problem that the student was solving is that college students struggle to understand and conduct academic research and to verify the credibility of information they find online. So the student's research paper explored how millennials find and use information online. So you want to pick a project focus, a thesis paper focus that's going to help make your project better. And I'll look at a few more examples in this video. The project itself, the thesis paper itself, is going to consist of several components that you'll complete throughout the semester with deadlines every couple weeks. The first is a research question followed by a thesis statement. You'll create an annotated bibliography, and then you'll write the paper starting with the literature review and introduction, major arguments, conclusion, and then you'll turn in the final paper the last week of the semester. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to see all of your work on the paper all the way up until the end of the semester. So everything is going to be a draft you're going to get feedback on, and then the final paper worth 200 points will be due at the end of the semester. The research question is where you will begin with the thesis paper. Once you know what your creative project will be, you're going to ask yourself what you need to know to be successful at creating it. This will help you determine what is called the research question. The research question is what you want to know related to your creative project. For example, if you are making a social network for BSU students, who are BSU athletics fans, people who are fans of Ball State teams, to share their fan stories, and you want to know how people use branded communities in sports marketing, you're going to conduct research into that. And your research question is going to be, how do people use branded communities in sports marketing? If you are producing a multimedia story about the history of Muncie and you want to know what multimedia features people learn the most from, your research question will be, how do people learn best from multimedia history presentations? If you're making a multimedia tour for a museum and you want to know how people learn best from multimedia tours, your research question will be, how do people best learn from multimedia tours? So the research question is related to your creative project. What do you need to know to be really successful at your creative project? That becomes your research question. The second step in the process is to draft the thesis statement. The answer to your research question is the thesis statement, or what you assert about the topic based on the research you found. So it's how you answer the question after you've conducted research. For example, you might research that research question about learning from multimedia, that second one, and you might find that people actually learn best when information is presented in both visual and verbal formats that are chunked into groups of topics or lessons. That's your thesis statement. And that thesis statement comes from the research that I've done into that question about how people best learn from multimedia. And by research, I mean that I've read other people's academic scientific research in which they've actually studied how people learn from multimedia presentations. So the thesis statement uses evidence found by academic researchers to reach a conclusion about your research question. That evidence must come from academic sources. For example, experiments and research conducted at academic institutions and published in academic journals. It is not an opinion. It is not your best guess. It is not somebody else's opinion. It's evidence. You're showing evidence to what the answer of your research question is. That becomes your thesis statement. Next, you will create an annotated bibliography. This means that you will read a number of journal articles and other academic publications in order to gather the evidence you need to answer your research question. And the annotated bibliography is a tool that will help you keep track of those sources. An annotated bibliography, which you will often hear me call an AB, is a list of the sources that you read. And for each item in the list, each book or journal article that you read, you're going to write about 200 words of explanation about what you learned from that source. So give the citation, what is the source, what is the name of it, who wrote it, we're going to use APA style, and then tell me in 200 words what the big takeaway from that piece of research was. What was the evidence you found in that piece of research? Here's an example of what an annotated bibliography entry looks like. You're going to have 20 of these in your full annotated bibliography, but you're going to write the annotated bibliography in steps. So the first time you turn it in, you'll only have 10 sources, and the second time, then you'll have 20 sources. So you're going to write 20 of those, but that doesn't mean you'll only read 20 papers. You will only include the sources that have evidence relevant to your topic that are actually helpful. I would estimate that for every paper you find that is helpful to you and has evidence that's useful for your paper, you'll probably find about half to another paper that you kind of glimpse over and start to read, but then realize it's not going to be helpful. That's okay. That's how research works. I did a research project once where I started with 29 articles that I thought were going to be helpful, and by the end, only 8 were helpful, and I had to throw out the other 21. That's okay. That's how research works, so don't feel bad if you're struggling to find pieces for your annotated bibliography. That's just what the process is like. We'll talk more about how to create an annotated bibliography before you have to do it in the class. Then you'll write the paper based on that annotated bibliography. So after you gather the research and the evidence and document it in your bibliography, then you're going to write the paper. And it's going to have an introduction, a literature review, major arguments, and a conclusion. And I will discuss all of those at length at the time before you need to write it. So before we write a literature review, I will explain to you what it is and how to write it. Finally, I will give you feedback throughout the semester, and you will have a final version of the paper due at the end of the semester worth 200 points. So when you turn in your first 10 annotated bibliography entries, I will give you feedback. You will have the chance to redo them, add 10 more to it, and then your annotated bibliography will be done. When you write your literature review, I will give you feedback, and you'll have the chance to go back and make changes. So by the time you turn in your final paper, the last week of the semester, I should have seen everything that's in it, at least at some point, as some kind of draft. The biggest issue I see in this class is that this is the project people let get away from them. They blow through the annotated bibliography, they don't really find sources, they just throw everything they can find into it. They miss deadlines on the arguments, they miss deadlines on the conclusion, and then by the end of the semester, when I'm seeing the paper, I'm seeing it for the first time, and it's too late for me to help you on it. So my biggest piece of advice for this project is to maintain your focus. Make sure everything you do in terms of researching is trying to answer your research question, and be really good about hitting those deadlines so that you can get feedback right when you need it.